Welcome, boys and girls, to another writing class with Mrs. Lyas. Today, we're going to talk about an author named Jonathan London. Do you know who he is? Do you know what kind of books that he writes? Here's a hint. Listen.
Froggy, 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 froggy. Froggy, 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 froggy.
Do you know now? Think about it for a second, and then let's find out more about Jonathan London. Are you ready? Let's begin. If you guessed that Jonathan London was the author of the Froggy books, then you are correct. We're going to start our unit on author studies. We're going to learn about Jonathan London and read many of his delightful Froggy books. His first book of the Froggy series is Froggy Gets Dressed. The author. Meet Jonathan London. Jonathan London is the creator of more than 20 books about the lovable and enduringly popular character Froggy. He is also a poet and a novelist. He burst on the children's book scene in 1992 with the publication of 3 picture books. Since then, he has published over 100 picture books, including the Froggy series and the young adult novel Where's Home? Jonathan London started writing poetry in his late teens. His first picture book. Mr. London started writing picture books when he started telling his own children bedtime stories. He wrote them down, and this is how his career as a writer started. His first published picture book is a book titled The Owl Who Became the Moon. A frog was born. After telling Froggy stories to his kids, they laughed and laughed, so he wrote them down. When Mr. London tried to sell his book to publishers, many publishers turned him down. He went to one publisher, and one publisher said yes. Boy, am I glad this publisher did. Now, let's read Jonathan London's first Froggy book. It's called Froggy Gets Dressed, written by Jonathan London and illustrated by Frank Remkowitz. Froggy Gets Dressed. It was cold. Froggy woke up and looked out the window. "Snow, snow," he sang. "I want to play in the snow." "Go back to sleep, Froggy," said his mother. "Don't you know? Frogs are supposed to sleep all winter. Wake up when the snow melts." "No, no," cried Froggy. "I'm awake, awake. I want to go out and play in the snow." So Froggy put on his socks, zoop, pulled on his boots, zop, put on his hat, zat, tied on his scarf, zit, tugged on his mittens, zum, and flopped outside into the snow, flop, flop, flop. "Froggy!" called his mother. "What?" yelled Froggy. "Did you forget to put something on?" Froggy looked down. "Oops!" cried Froggy. "I forgot to put on my pants." He flopped back inside, flop, 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 tugged on his mitten, untied his scarf, took off his hat, pulled off his boots, he left his socks on, and slipped his pants on, zip. Then he pulled on his boots, zup, put on his hat, zap, tied on his scarf, zit, tugged on his mittens, zoom, and flopped back outside into the snow. Flop, flop, flop. Froggy, called his mother. What? Yelled Froggy. Did you forget to put something on? Froggy looked down. Oops, he cried. I forgot to put on my shirt. And your coat, added his mother. He flopped back inside. Flop, flop, flop. Tugged off his mittens, untied his scarf, took off his hat. He left his pants, boots, and socks on, and buttoned up his shirt. Zut, zut, zut. Then he snapped on his coat, zap, put on his hat, zap, tied on his scarf, zip, tugged on his mittens, zoom, and flopped back outside into the snow. Flop, flop, flop. Froggy, called his mother. What? Yelled Froggy. Did you forget to put something on? Froggy looked down. He had on his mittens. He had on his scarf. He had on his coat. He had on his shirt. He had on his pants. He had on his boots. He had on his socks. He reached up. Yep, he had on his hat. What could be missing? Your underwear, his mother laughed. Oops, cried Froggy, looking more red in the face than green. He flopped back inside. Flop, flop, flop. Tugged off his mittens, untied his scarf, unsnapped his coat, unbuttoned his shirt, unzipped his pants, put off his boots, took off his socks, he left his hat on, and slipped his long johns on with a zap of elastic. And then he put on one sock, zoop, pulled up one boot, zup, tugged on one mitten, zoom. He started to tug on the other and let it drop and said, I'm too tired, and went back to sleep. Zzz. Good night, Froggy. What did you notice about the story? What patterns did you see? Think about it. Did you see onomatopoeias, sound effect? If so, where did you see them? Think about it. Did you see that Froggy kept forgetting things? He would put one thing on, get excited, go outside, and then he would forget to put something on, and he had to go back. That was a pattern throughout the book. And then Froggy's mom kept calling his name. It was almost as if she waited for him to put one thing on, let him go outside, and then she'll say, Froggy! And then she kept calling him to come back on, to come back inside to put something else on. Do you think Mom had a strategy there? Do you think she was trying to have him go outside, putting on one thing at a time so that he could keep coming back in and get tired? Well, these were some of the patterns that I saw when I was reading Jonathan London's Froggy Gets Dressed. Now, boys and girls, we will be reading more books by Jonathan London. We are going to read more books so that we can understand his writing style. After we understand Jonathan London's writing style, we will be writing our own story and we will use Jonathan London's writing style, his characteristics of writing. Now, take a look at the screen. You will have to write your own story someday, but today I want you to think of your main character. What character would you use for your story? Now, Jonathan London, he used a frog for his main character. Now, you can use any other animal. You can use a panda or a dog or a cat. You can use a lizard or a snake. You can even use a unicorn, because the stories that we're going to be writing will be fictional stories, which means that we're going to make it up. All right? Now, something else that Jonathan London, when he was thinking of his character, he came up with the frog. He had to come up with the character's name. He named the character Froggy. All right? Now, let's take a look. The next thing he did is he gave his character an age. And based on what Froggy was doing in this story, I would say he's about 5 or 6, just by the way that he was acting. Well, his favorite color? Well, Jonathan London never told us in this story what Froggy's favorite color is, but because he's a frog, I would think it's green. And then with your character, you can come up with your character's favorite food. Well, Jonathan London never talked about the food part in this story. However, he did bring it up in other stories. Froggy's favorite food are flies. He's a frog. He loves to eat flies. Now, his physical description. Over here on this side, what is the character like on the outside? What does the character look like on the outside? Well, Froggy is green with skinny legs and big feet. He's a frog. So when you do your paper, you're going to have to think about your character, and then you're going to have to describe what your character is like. So the first thing you're going to do when you get this paper is that you're going to draw your character in the middle. You're going to color it, give it all of the features and things that you want, and then you will describe his physical description. Now on this side, the right side, is the character traits. Now we've talked about character traits earlier this year. A character trait is what the character is like on the inside. If you take a look at the right, I put up some words to kind of help you. He could be a nice person, mean person, sad person, a brave person, nervous. So here are some words to help describe Froggy. And if I had to describe Froggy based on the book that we just read, I would say that Froggy is independent. His mom and dad never had to get out of the bed. He was able to dress himself, get out of the bed himself, open a door and go play in the snow by himself. I would also say that he's excited. He was excited to see snow. He couldn't wait. He just jumped out of bed and got ready. And I think that he's a little silly. He went outside without his pants on, so he's a little silly. So these will be the character traits, what the character is like on the inside. So you're going to think about your lovable animal or character, and you're going to tell me what that character's personality trait is. All right, now things that my character likes are, now because we haven't written a story, you're going to have to think of all of this on your own. Remember, the story that we're going to write is going to be fiction. Today we are not writing stories, we're just trying to come up with the character. It could be a bear, it could be a dog, it could be a bobcat, it could be a fish. You come up with the character. All right, but here are some of the things that Froggy liked in the story. We know that he likes the snow. And something special about my character? Well, Froggy usually sleeps during the winter, but he got up to go out and play in the snow. That's something special about the character. All right, well, boys and girls, this sheet or this page, Create a Character, can be found in the Google Classroom. So you will click on Google Classroom or go to our Google Classroom and click on the writing section, and then make sure that you click on create a character to fill out and draw the character that you may want to use in your story.